Hello, everyone, and welcome to a thing that's a little bit weird for Runeterrable. It's a little, this is past Blevins, ooh, haunting you from a time that happened a day or more ago. I don't know why I did that. But I wanted to do this little pre-show thing because, as you probably know from the Twitter and Discord announcements or the title of this podcast that you're listening to or watching, we've got Riot Umbrage on the show this week. So instead of doing all of the normal pre-show stuff that we would do during the show, I figured I would make the best use of his time for both his sake and for yours, so we can just talk about Legends of Runeterra and other stuff that I'm sure we're going to get off on tangents with, but not housekeeping stuff. So wanted to address that a little bit before, and I'll try to keep it short. So first thing is first, we got a brand new patron. We got Yoris R. I hope I'm saying that right. I'm probably not. But thank you so much for the patron, €2 patron. So welcome, and thank you for that. And if you want to become a patron, you can as well. Patreon.com/Runeterrable Radio for that. Speaking of Patreon, the new Patreon newsletter, I believe by the time you're listening to this, will be out. I have it 90+% done. So you should have that on Patreon when you hear this. So this week, or this month, I did a little more sort of personal development, talked a little bit about getting into the gaming and esports space, and how you can possibly too. It's a question that people ask me all the time. It's not super on, doesn't have a ton to do with Legends of Runeterra specifically, though it does tie in to our featured author this week, which is Cosine Joe. So wanted to give a little bit there and let you know that you can go over to patreon.com/Runeterrable Radio. And if you become a patron at any level, you will get access to the monthly newsletter. And, you know, it's just a fun little writing exercise for me and for others. But if you want to write a piece for the newsletter, hit me up on Discord, discord.me/Runeterrable Radio if you're not already in there. Send me a DM and let me know what you want to write about. I'm happy, and I'm extremely happy to feature community writers. I'm going to be writing bits on it. At the beginning and probably the intro and outro to all of them. But if we can get community writers that want to be featured, I'm happy to take submissions there. So enough about that. One last piece here that I want to talk about before the interview is you'll definitely have seen the official announcement by the time you listen to this. But I am officially working for Wisdom Gaming, a.k.a. the parent company of Giant Slayer. So if you're not familiar with Giant Slayer Fight Night Legends has been a tournament that we've done every week for the past, I think, many months. I think we're going to be coming up on Fight Night 16. And we've done other ones as well. So I'm going to be casting and doing some other stuff for them officially full-time. So I've been doing it for a while, but the official announcement hasn't come out. I know I alluded to it earlier, but the official announcement will be out by the time you hear this. So just wanted to let you know that. And if you had any questions, if you have any thoughts or questions or suggestions for Giant Slayer, for LOR, or for any of the other stuff that Wisdom is doing, feel free to shoot me a message, or you can shoot me an email if you want to be more official. Yeah, shoot me a DM on Discord, and we can definitely talk there. But just wanted to let you know that and get that out there so it's not a secret. I mean, it was the worst kept secret because, if people ask me, I would tell them it wasn't really a secret. I was just waiting for the official announcement to say it on air. So, okay, I'm rambling now, so that means it's a good time to cut out. Enjoy the interview. I, right now, don't know how it went because it hasn't happened yet for me, but you're about to know what it's going to be like. So with that, I'll pass it over to you, Blev, and you can start the show. Blev? Thanks, Blev. Let's get the podcast started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Runeterrable Radio. I am Blevins. With me, as always, is Saucy. What's up, buddy?
Hey, what's going on? So was that the best intro we've ever had to this podcast? Or?
Oh, the podcast listeners will get it because there's a pre-recorded thing where I toss to myself in the future, which is me right now. So it's kind of like the present, but now, and it will soon be the I don't know I still don't know how to do podcast time math. But Saucy, enough of this random banter for no reason. We have a very special guest. We have Legends of Runeterra game director Riot Umbrage on the show. Welcome.
What's up, guys? It's been we've been trying to have this show for forever, like a year.
It's true.
Yeah.
I'm what I call ambitious, what other people call annoying in terms of reaching out to people early and often. But I guess that's why I work in sales. But yeah, we this has been a long time coming, and the stars have finally aligned on a definitely not important day in history. It's not like the most important day in our modern lives. It's just a random Tuesday.
Day, yeah.
You know, it's just like Legends of Runeterra. We only want to compete against the best, right?
Yeah.
So
It's true.
We can take it.
we figured we could steal some airways from the national election.
Yeah, whatever. I think we really were talking like when we were starting this show back in like the first closed beta. I think didn't we hit you up to come on like
I probably
before the
did.
game came
I
out?
probably
So
did.
it's literally been like
I probably forwarded you to like 14 people, and you got bounced around in the internal email hell of our publishing or whatever.
No, that was good though. I met some really good people through that. But it's like yeah, I just want to come on a podcast. Oh wait, no, I probably shouldn't do that. And then and then the suits are like, don't talk to this.
But now I'm on vacation. Now I'm on vacation week, so this is I'm not representing the company here, even though I 100% am.
All views.
Yes, but no.
All views said by Riot in this episode do not reflect Riot Games or Legends of Runeterra.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good. I need that. I need that pre-recorded.
I mean, I could pre-record.
We'll get you the audio.
If you give me some foil cards, then maybe we can do that. But
Ooh, good trades.
A spoiler of some questions. I bet.
Ooh. Yes, we do have a little bit of an outline, but as anyone who's listened to the show before, or even is listening right now, can kind of tell, we're just gonna kind of wing it and just have a little bit of fun. But I always like to start off at the beginning, and I want to know a little bit about your sort of gaming origin, Umbrage, because it's always nice to get a little bit of a frame of context there.
Yeah, it's I can't say it's like any superhero or supervillain story I've ever heard, but I grew up with, I wouldn't say strict parents, but they certainly were strict in certain ways. And one of the ways in which they were strict was basically the access I could have to video games. So I grew up, kind of like on the edge of like Atari, and then of course, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis. My first console that I owned was a Sega Genesis. And so basically, for like years, my parents banned me from playing games, and then I got a Genesis. And then it was like the floodgates opened, except the only games they would buy me were Disney games. And I don't know if you remember those, like Aladdin.
Yes.
The Lion King one.
Like not a Disney game, but there's another game, Kid Chameleon. These games were fucking impossible. And I was like 7, and so I had all these preconceptions about how amazing video games were, and then I just got trashed. So fast forward to middle school, high school, and then college. Discovered Magic the Gathering, played a ton casually, and then in college picked up some other card games, including Warhammer 40K made by Sabretooth Games. It feels weird. I guess I can say that because I don't think they actually exist as a company anymore, so I'm not pitching for a competitor. And the game store I played at actually shipped me out to Indianapolis to go to a gaming convention. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Gen Con.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, I think at the time, so now it's in Minneapolis or Indianapolis,
Yeah.
but at the time it was actually Milwaukee still.
Oh wow.
And so they shipped me out along with the store owner, and we crushed fools. And so that was kind of my, and I actually won the event. And of course, you know, there was no money behind it because it was like a 30-person tournament or whatever. But I won a giant life-size like broadsword. And so I brought the broadsword to the airport, and you know, I'm like in college, so I'm like a dumbass, right? And I'm ready for my flight, and they're like, "What do you?
You can't take a broadsword."
Yeah. So we had to. So you know, 2 hours later we check it in, and one of my fondest memories was going to the Game Zone in Pasadena, which was the store I played at, on like a random, you know, Sunday afternoon, and the owner of the store was just in the middle of the empty store, just swinging my broadsword around, like yelling like he was Conan the Barbarian, and I was like, bro, that's my sword. You can't touch my sword, man. But yeah, so you know, I would say in retrospect, of course, I've had a long career playing games, but if anything, I would probably credit my parents for forbidding me to for playing games as like the reason that I am in gaming and you know the game industry today.
There are few greater motivators of something than having your parents tell you can't do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think I'm like a Sith at heart, because I'm just, you know, all the negative energy is just fuel, you know, just
Fueled by chaos.
Yeah. Just...
That's awesome. So how do you go from crushing at Gen Con, winning a broadsword as a prize, which is a great prize, by the way, if you're looking for inspiration for the seasonal tournaments? I mean, broadsword would be pretty great, just putting it out there. How do you go from that to working at Riot Games? Where does that come in?
Yeah, so you know, like I said, in college, I was playing a lot of card games. At the same time, I was studying for a computer science degree. And at the time, I thought my computer science degree was going to be the thing that got me into the industry, like got me into, you know, developing video games. But I actually had a real hard time getting into the industry as a programmer. And in retrospect, probably it was because I didn't really have my heart in programming. But I basically kept playing card games. I jumped onto a card game called Marvel Versus. Made by a company called Upper Deck.
Yes.
And I actually interviewed to be an intern at Upper Deck, and they turned me down. And so, but then I continued to play their game, and I ended up competing in their first pro tour. I got 9th on Breakers. And that was actually the pro tour that Brian Kibler won.
Yeah.
And he and I would actually both go on to work at Upper Deck. So basically, after I got 9th, they were like, "Well, you're not an idiot. So like maybe you can, you can play tests for us." So you know, that was I actually was working as an engineer, as a research engineer at the time in government defense. And so I basically, you know, I was like 3 months into that job, and I kind of infamously quit the day that I got my security clearance. So like the morning that you know, the government officers basically came in and gave me like my security briefing, and then I gave my 2 weeks notice, and they were like, "Well, we're still here. We might as well debrief you." And I'm like, I haven't learned state secrets. So they debriefed me, and then I made the jump, and it was a pretty big leap of faith, because it was actually an internship, so it wasn't even like a guaranteed job or anything. Working at Upper Deck on the Marvel card game, the Marvel and DC versus card game. And then from that, I joined Carbine Studios to work on their sci-fi MMO Wildstar, and then after that jumped to Riot Games. You know, I can't claim that I knew that League of Legends was going to be the enormous success that it was. I pretty much jumped in when it was like obviously safe, and this game's going bonkers. So you know, definitely riding the coattails of the company's success there. Yeah, I've been at Riot for the last 9 years now.
Wow. So
yeah, Wildstar was awesome. I played that game for a while.
You and I mean, I appreciate you and the other 12
people. Yeah, exactly. That was the problem.
When we couldn't put a 40-man raid together, we knew we were in trouble.
Yeah,
I hit max level and like could never find any group, and I was like, oh, I guess I shouldn't play this game.
Oh, that sucks. That stinks. So
I mean, the our game obviously wasn't that successful, but a lot of my team, when I still keep in touch with them, like went on to work on bigger and better things. Like designer at Bungie. One's actually basically got their dream job. He's one of the leads on World of Warcraft. Actually, that sounded like he re-upped on. So
Nice.
he's clearly doing his job right. So
Yep. Yeah, let him know
That's
he's doing
awesome.
okay. He gets my stamp of approval.
He gets your stamp of approval and your $15 monthly as well. So wait, did you play the Sabretooth Savage Beatdown deck to win to get 9th at the Pro Tour?
What did I play? I played I was one of 2 people that played the New Brotherhood. It was basically like it was like a resource sacrificing like aggressive deck that had Brotherhood and I think it was actually like mono Brotherhood. I might be misremembering, but yeah, it had Savage Beatdown in it.
Yeah.
The meta had Doctor Doom, and he played what was it, Reign of Terror, like the card that just bounces 3 drops for free on the house, and you just can't, you just couldn't win against that. They had like Mystical Paralysis too, where you could just tap down your biggest guy every round, and yeah, that was not a good deck to bring to that tournament. So I'd like to say I succeeded despite those odds. Kibler played Doom, which was certainly the best deck in that format.
Yep. Man, I loved that game back in the day. I was like a little bit too young to like play competitively, but I guess I probably could have. But I love Marvel, but I loved that game, and it was great.
Right on.
But
I mean, if it caught you when you were younger, you probably learned a lot of good math skills because that game had a lot of math.
Oh yeah. Well, I was also playing Yu-Gi-Oh and MTG as well. So I mean, I was great at math in high school, as long as it involved adding or subtracting numbers between 0 and 20. I was
yeah, exactly. I could count to 20, and so it was good enough for Magic. Like that's all you needed.
Yep.
21 because I also played blackjack, like a true high school degenerate. I was gambling in high school as well.
As you should. Don't do that, kids. Don't do that.
I say do it, but you know what? I don't care. Just what we need is legalized poker. But I'm not. Today is not the day for political stances because nothing is political today. Because this is a random Tuesday, not the fate of the universe Tuesday. It's just a random Tuesday. But yeah, so I mean that's really interesting to hear all of that. I did not know that you played the Marvel Versus because that's an old favorite of mine. But that's
awesome. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, I love that game. But let's talk about. I don't know, Saucy. Should we talk about Legends of Runeterra at some point?
I guess we could. Like sometimes we sprinkle some Runeterra into this podcast. So I guess today could be a day for that.
I mean, look, it's only the game that I've spent half my career working on, so no big deal.
So you have played, the game, okay?
You know it, okay?
A little bit.
Okay, cool.
So you've spent you've been working on Runeterra for almost 5 years, if that. Did I do the math right?
Yeah, so I've been at Riot for 9 years.
Right.
And Legends of Runeterra, or hey, Riot, this concept of Riot should make a League of Legends card game has existed basically that whole time.
Really?
Whereas Legends of Runeterra, mostly in its current form, has, as you said, only existed in the last like 4 or 5 years.
We say only, but that's a long time for us who did. Yeah, I literally didn't know the game at all. I mean, maybe I just wasn't in on the secret, but I didn't know until like the day it was announced.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I think that's a really testament to like how well Riot kept a lot of its R&D projects secret. Because like projects like Legends of Runeterra, Valorant, like those projects have been in the works for forever, and in many ways, like it's actually not that exceptional, right? Like Diablo 3, that was as far as we know, as outsiders, like that was another decade game, So these sort of games don't get made overnight.
Yeah, which is interesting. I mean, it's always crazy to think, like, considering that information is everywhere. That it like, I mean. Again, I maybe some people knew. I was not privy to it. I literally heard the so I think it got like spoiled by like Slasher like the day before the announcement.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember seeing that tweet and being like, "Oh shit, I'm gonna have to do another podcast."
We all had a big inhale with no exhale moment there.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I had I didn't know anything about Riot beforehand because I never played League. I found out about it from just some Hearthstone people. Like, hey, are you gonna play this game? I'm like, what the hell is that? I've never heard. Like, I aren't those the League of Legends guys? Like, I don't want to.
Right.
And then
Which is wild, right? Because League of
yeah,
Legends, arguably still is one of the biggest, PC games, right? And I think that really just shows like
yeah,
how big gaming is in general. Yeah,
Mhm.
that you can, basically be like, what the hell's that company?
yeah, exactly.
yeah. Well, I mean, you've been working on the game for so long, and obviously it's been out for. I mean, have we hit we haven't hit a year
Yeah,
yet, have we?
we just hit it. We just
Yeah.
hit a year, I
We
think.
It was
just hit
if
the
October.
year.
you're counting our closed beta.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're like just a year in, barely. You've been working on it for much longer than that. What does the game look like now compared to what you maybe envisioned it? I mean, early on, or even when it was just in its sort of current iteration. What's the delta there between what you envisioned and what it is now?
Yeah, I would say in many ways it's completely exceeded my expectations in terms of like quality of the core gameplay, the level of sort of meta diversity that we've reached. Like I know there have been a lot of complaints about the current metas and recent metas, but when you look at I forget his name exactly, Cosmic's meta breakdown.
Yep.
And it's like there's a bunch of top decks, and then rest of field is like more than half of the field.
Yeah.
It's like if that was any if that was any random Magic tournament, they'd be like, we're doing hot.
Oh yeah.
So I think a lot of the things that we wanted as CCG players, we're very much seeing. Of course, we've been delighted by like the community and how much different streamers have popped off, as well as different streaming communities and talk shows. In terms of the game itself, it's funny because even though I've been working on it for so long, I still kind of look at it like a baby, where we're in the game of like kind of like slaying giants, right? And like this year when we launched the game, it was really about like, hey, there's kind of some BS about this genre that is associated with this genre that like we don't think the genre should take credit for, right? Like how is it that the one thing people took away from the card game genre is like packs, like and that's the thing that has reached like all the other game genres. Like that's, from my perspective as somebody who loves the genre, that's like really disappointing. And so that was kind of like the first giant that we tried to slay, right? With the end of this year with seasonal tournaments, the next one on our roadmap is kind of like making sure that people can have really awesome competitive experiences in the game, right? Where like I was talking about with all those anecdotes around traveling the world, playing card games. Like I only barely got a taste of what it was like to play at that level, right? But particularly during COVID times, like people aren't going to be jumping on a plane to go play in a tournament in Indianapolis in the middle of the country,
Especially not with a broadsword.
Right now. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, getting people a taste of that experience just in the digital client, I think is really compelling to me as somebody who grew up trying to play those games competitively. But when I step back even farther, I think there are still so many other opportunities, whether that's like making the game more social, making the game have be more of like a platform for card games, making the game have like all the customization, alternate art, and like all of the I'm a big fan of like the art alters that like Magic, not like their mainline artists, but like a lot of like Magic fans do, for their cards and their cubes. I'm a big cube player, and so like to me, it's like there's like we're on like step 1.5 of like a 10-step plan, and so I even though I feel like we've come a long way, like there's so much more to go.
Yeah, that's really, it's good to like think of it that way, because I feel like because not that anyone in any community ever gives any flack for anything, but like seeing your passion for card games specifically, not that the team behind this game are card game players. That's why it's something that Blevins and I praise all the time. Like, here's things that we hated from Magic or Hearthstone or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, and like here's why we like the diversity of all these playable decks, how you don't have to spend literally all of your money to get a competitive deck. It was like the first week of release, Blevins and are like, we've played this game for a week and we each have 3-4 competitive decks.
Yeah.
Just coming from problems that you see inside of just gaming as a whole, not even like a specific card game, but like a whole genre of games, and take like attacking it from that angle. And it's something that, like, I mean, as someone who's been playing card games forever, that's something that really drew me to Runeterra itself, and that I feel has done very well myself.
Right on. I think it's like I think the question of like in industry, like one of the questions that I always like to talk about is like, is it a passion industry, or is it kind of like a more of like almost like a science or an academic one, you know, where like I think there are game developers and game designers who look at it like not unemotionally, but like look at it like it's a job, and like they're gonna, you know, solve hard problems, and like that's like really like stimulating, you know, and curious. Whereas for me, like you're saying, like you know, I in many ways when I look back, I'm like, I was built to make this game. Like, you know, when I trace the history of like, you know, my like gaming background, and I think you know, there are days when you're faced with problems that feel like impossibly hard, or you're faced with like, you know, maybe some player outcry about an event that you just announced, where that passion to just bring to elevate the genre and your game, you know, help you get through those and feel like, yeah, that's just another thing that I need to learn from, you know.
Yeah, I mean that's like, to echo what Saucy was saying, that really makes you feel good as a player, and I mean even more so on our side as content creators and people who are involved in the community, at least in some way. It's like, it's really nice to see that the people who are making the game have the same sort of passions that we do, and like, for better or for worse, and maybe Umbrage, you can speak a little more to this. Like, you as a team are very open and vocal and about feedback and giving feedback. And I mean, you're coming on shows like ours and other shows and posting, you know, sort of the thought process behind that, which is, now it seems kind of like, well, yeah, I mean, we're expecting an answer in every patch for everything, but like, you look even like a couple years ago in other companies, it's like you don't hear anything from anyone, and like Ben Brode at BlizzCon comes out in an awesome costume and says something awesome, and that's great, but like, you hear nothing from anyone. And I guess I'd love to hear your thoughts on being what it's like being so open with the community as a game developer.
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, you know, one of the reasons we were so anxious to launch the game, even given kind of like the, you know, we're on step 1 out of 10, is because we were so anxious to interact with players and get that feedback loop going. You know, events like KDA and our labs and honestly everything that we do, we look at it as like, this is a conversation starter with our players to figure out what resonates with our players and what they love or don't love, you know. It's funny. It's so funny you mentioned that, because I think I think the industry has very much kind of changed over the last like decade. Where one of the reasons I came to Riot was because the head of game design at the time, Tom Cadwell, basically posted, you know, somebody was complaining about, you know, something in League of Legends, and he posted like, here are my 6-bit gameplay pillars of like good game design. And you know, I read them and they resonated with me, and I was like, yeah, this is somebody who's like basically willing to put himself out there, have like a candid conversation with the community, and you know, has really nuanced and you know, thoughtful, you know, insights. And that was something that I wanted, you know, to do for myself as a game developer. And so for us, like, it's interesting because I'm like, I don't know if we could imagine it any other way. Like our culture within the team is very much one of open feedback. You know, KDA in and of itself was not without, you know, discussion. You know, very little is without discussion when we go out with ideas that we're going to be bold, like even within the team. So in many ways, like, you know, interacting with players is just an extension of like how we like to talk about problems with, you know, our team.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly, I mean, from our now spoiled gamer seats, like, that's great. I mean, it's like, hey, you change this, this is why. Okay, I understand that. Now, of course, there are some people that in the community that aren't as accepting, or as maybe I don't know, what's a good word, Saucy, that aren't as reasonable, I guess, in there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and this is just the thing. Like, it isn't what we're used to, right? Like we'll get patch notes for another game if they put out a patch, but
Yeah.
you like with the patch notes we get in this game, it's like here's the changes, but here's like our thought process and why.
Mhm.
And something else that like blew my mind, especially at the start, was the willingness to revert changes. That's
Mhm.
not something that happens in other games because normally it's we change this and this is the new correct. It's more, hey, we have the ability to. This is a fully digital card game. We don't have to worry about
Yeah.
paper prints. We don't have to worry
Yeah.
about anything. We can make a change, and if for this season, if it makes sense for what Vile Feast to be 2 mana, and this season it should be 3 mana because of the meta,
Mhm.
whatever, you can change and revert, and like that's something that's like very interesting to this specific game.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think for us, we really needed to approach the live side of the game with a lot of humility because yeah, our team has a bunch of CCG industry veterans, but like you're saying, that veterancy really got us to the point where we're used to working in paper, right? Like we're
Mhm.
used to kind of like putting a bow on it, shipping it out, and just kind of like crossing our fingers. So where we believe we needed to learn the most and be willing to experiment was on that.
Mhm.
Like, hey, we're trying to make of course, a great card game, but a great digital card game. So, I think some of that response was due to that.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, just to wrap that part up, I think it's great, and I think I speak for the community in saying thank you for that because it's really nice to get that sort of insight into the game that we all love.
No.
Now we talked a little bit about this in the pre-show, and we've already sort of hinted at it a little bit. KDA came out, and it's been a mixed conversation in terms of the community's reaction to it. I think is a safe way to put it.
It hasn't been boring.
Yeah.
When I'm working, my sort of like morning ritual is to kind of wake up and just like check social media, check Reddit, see what players are responding to and what the sentiments are. And that was that was not a boring set of mornings when we announced that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And of course, Saucy and I have been very vocal about our
appreciate the support.
Yeah, our praise of KDA of it, because I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I will play with blank cards with the text written on them. I will play with playtest versions of cards. I don't care. I love the lore, and I love the Runeterra lore, and the voices and the animations. All that is amazing. But at its core, as a game, I will play the core game without any of that. So I don't care what is added personally, but we of course want to have other opinions and voices heard on the show. So I aired this before, so anyone who's heard this interview before, I'm sorry, I'm going to play it again. It's real short, but for anyone new and for Umbrage, I wanted to play a little interview I did with some people who were not as enthusiastic about the KDA effects in Runeterra. Take a listen. Okay. Yeah. There's the bill. There's the gag.
It's so funny because I listened to the previous episodes that had this, but when you said like, "Hey, I interviewed somebody," for whatever reason, I was like, "Oh, okay, great!" Like I'm
you still got debated.
I'm legitimately interested to hear, how you crystallize, player sentiment around this. But
no.
I mean, Kitty was super interesting because I think we actually understand very much where a lot of players are coming from.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to like the reasons they love Legends of Runeterra, right? Like in terms of the role that we play as part of like the League of Legends IP ecosystem, like we're actually the game, outside of like some of the new upcoming games like the Rune King, we're the game that actually advances the setting and the relationships with the characters. So I very much empathize with that, and it's not like we're saying like, no, we're not going to do that, but like I said again, like a lot of our new events and labs are active experiments with players to really understand what resonates, what works, and what doesn't. And for card experiments in particular, I think this is actually one of the questions that one of the viewers had. Like, we work on sets 2 years out. Like, we are working on a 2022 set right now and deciding like what theme should it be, right? And so when we look at it internally, and we're like, hey, are we interested in one day looking at alt universes? like that's something that we have to understand how players would react and how we would execute, like way before we actually make that decision.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, on a more serious note, I'm sorry anyone who actually has legitimate concerns with KDA. Actually, I'm kind of not that sorry, but I'll I have my opinion.
Response.
I have my opinions on your opinions, but and I appreciate the insight there, Umbrage. What I'm on a more serious note, and this is actually serious. It's not a setup. Which I could see why you might think it would be, but on a serious note, I mean, how much does the feedback on Reddit and Twitter and whatnot, how much does that factor in? Because at some point, yes, it's or on the one hand, it's very good to know that the devs are hearing feedback, but also on the other hand, if the devs are listening to all of the feedback that at least that I'm seeing, I don't want what a lot of people think is a good idea to be put into the game because I see what those ideas are. So I mean, where does that sort of what's the balance there between taking feedback and being like, hey, we're the devs?
So I would say, I've never worked on a game of the scale of Legends of Runeterra, and I think one of the things that you discover very quickly when you have a really big player base is you're never going to bat 1,000. I actually don't play any sports, so I'm gonna like misuse a lot of sports.
No, that was correct. That was correct.
Hell yeah! I don't know why it's 1,000 instead of 100, but
I don't know either, but it is.
Somebody should teach them some maths.
It was back in 1847. Dugout Joe. No, okay, go
on. So we of course with us being based out of the States, we read Reddit a lot, we read Twitter a lot. We do put stock into that, but usually it's more like, hey, is this early smoke that signals like a fire, as opposed to we really need to like take an emergency action right now. And the challenge with that is, of course, like, and we run into this with our balance patches, due to the publishing cycle of like having to work with Apple Store and on that sort of like delay to ship to players, is that we both want to act as punctually as possible, but also we don't want to overreact or act based on basically like a minority player sentiment. So with something like KDA, we'll have initial player sentiment that we see on like social media, not just on Reddit and Twitter, but actually around the world. But the things that we put more stock into are actually basically like end of event surveys that we run with bigger swaths of the player base in every region. That's what gives us a little bit more of a complete picture, where we basically ask players like, hey, did you love this? What did you love about it specifically? What didn't you love? For KDA in particular, we'll be asking questions, like the typical, like, hey, do you like this battle pass? Like, would you want to play more of them? Do you like the, specific rewards? Which rewards? Which ones don't you love? So if players are like, get these cards out of here, we're confident that we're asking the right questions to understand where that sentiment comes up, and that's what we're going to use to gauge that, right? But coming back to your question, it's with events that are not these huge card releases, it's really challenging to make something for everyone, right? And I think that's kind of the trap is when you're releasing 5 cards, it's not a set, right? You don't have like 100 cards to work with. We can't make everyone happy. And so what we need to be inclined to do is understand, who is this for? And for that audience, did they love it? And if so, great. And I mean, of course, there's also a contrary question of, well, who wasn't it for, and did they light you on fire, in their hatred for it, right? Because we're accepting of like polarizing themes, but to a degree, right? Like that's why Timo's in the game, is because he draws sharp opinion. So in terms of a lot of takeaways, for us, it might be like, there's of course a lot of execution, a lot of like, well, which alternate universes would players love? Maybe we actually didn't go far enough insofar as like it feels kind of half-assed for players where some who maybe are on the fence are like, hey, I'm excited about alt universe, but you got to take me there. You can't just like kind of like dip your toe into it, right? So those are the questions that we want to ask ourselves to really understand it. But yeah, it's a complicated topic, and it always will be every time we do one of these sort of smaller releases.
Yeah, and I think like kind of it in it makes, when you think of it more of like a bigger picture thing, how you're saying like these events are new, right? This is only the second one we've had, and you're using them as a learning experience, and coming from the position of this, it's not just like Legends of Runeterra itself isn't just like a quick cash grab game. Like you're thinking of this long term, like you said, this is step 1 of 12. It's in its infancy, so you're still learning about things. So it's not like this is the event, this is end all be all. Everything is going to be just like this. This is how the battle passes work. Like not thinking of it so narrow minded, I think is just a trap that a lot of players get into.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't even fault players who didn't like the event, and I don't think of them as narrow-minded, right? Like it's not their job to like something that's not for them, right?
Sure.
I think it's what it is their job as players is to tell us what they like and don't like, right? And then we are responsible for stepping back and zooming out and saying like, okay, across the entire player base, like which decisions should we make, right? So for me, the KD experience has been a great like back and forth with players. It definitely has gotten spicier than I would like at times, but like I said, like this is kind of the pact that I made when I signed up to make a card game at Riot Games is this back and forth with players. So
yeah, I mean that's extremely it's reassuring for me to hear that, because I see like it's one thing where I can look on Twitter and I can see people making having takes that I don't agree with, and that's fine, but it's like, well, how much of this is actually heard from the devs? And I think it's a really
we read all of it. We probably spend too much time reading
which is good, but also you're taking an approach that is reasonable in terms of how to process that feedback. So that makes me feel a lot better, and not like, oh God, if people just whine on Reddit loud enough, then we're gonna be seeing everything reverted, and the people on Twitter are gonna be designing the game. But I'm glad to hear that that's not how it is.
For better or worse, Legends of Runeterra is a global game, and we have to consider all the regions and all the responses. And I think for KDA in particular, I would say that actually the sharpest negative response that we've seen actually has been mostly on Reddit and Twitter and sort of NA side, NAU side. But I think verdicts is still out, but we're very much listening and talking about what does that mean for us in the future.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, I can give you my personal feedback of I've really enjoyed the event. I bought all of the cosmetics, and I snap equipped the KDA board for all of my decks. So there you go. So this is a question that maybe, if you can't answer it, that's fine. But it's something that I've been wondering, coming from a Magic the Gathering background, and it's something that a lot of other MTG folks that I've talked with have wondered. I know Saucy, we've talked about this too. One thing about Magic that is great is that you can read a card and it reads out very literally and very, essentially, with a few exceptions, hashtag layers. Exactly what the card's going to do.
Technically well written.
Yeah. Is there any thoughts of like a master rule book, like the MTG comprehensive rules, like on the back end, or like a clarification of wording on cards to like know more succinctly? Like, am I going to get last breath effects for something like that sort of like clarification, I guess?
Yeah, candidly, we don't have any plans to do a public comprehensive rules doc right now. I think when it comes to like the complexity of our game, of course, I agree that like our game's hella complicated, as is Magic. But like you're saying, Magic is really well written technically. Some of the reason that they need to do that, of course, is because they're a paper game,
Right.
and so you kind of have to know in the moment, when it's you staring across, the kitchen table, like, hey, how does this play out? Like, you don't really have an adjudicator, right? You don't really have a computer that can play it out for you. I think that when I think of the complexity of our game, I can see it kind of going two directions. One would basically be we resolve enough of the interactions to get to a point where most players, at least after it's happened, kind of shrug their shoulders and say like, okay, that's pretty intuitive. Like now that now that I've seen it play out once, or we can go you know, the like, no, it's just going to remain completely, you know, obtuse, and we're going to release like something like a comprehensive rulebook, right? But I think in that framing, comprehensive rulebook almost feels like a fail state to me, you know, where it's like our game is so complicated that you need, you know, a manual to play it. I'm like, that's not a great outcome, you know, particularly if we're trying to like reach new players and, you know, continue to be a reasonably welcoming game in terms of new players joining, right? So I think when I see questions like that, I hear it more as, hey, your game has a lot of interactions that are completely unintuitive, like fix that. Yeah. As opposed to like explain how it works, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think it's the type of thing where like now, and I'm biased obviously because I watch so much and play so much. It's like, well, yeah, of course I know that this happens, and like, yeah, Garen's judgment won't work here, or it will. But and I guess, you know, a lot of people still ask those questions for Magic anyway, so maybe it won't help one way or the other. People still don't know how cards work.
It's super interesting because I think, you know, we were really optimistic about Oracle's Eye pre-answering a lot of those questions, you know, and I think it actually does, but so many interactions basically happen off the eye. You know, start a round, end of round procedures are good examples of that. Burst, of course. Slow, I think, you know, gets addressed well. Teemo just blanks out the opponent. I love how Teemo's secret power comes in the fact that it turns your opponent's Oracle Eye off, so that they can't, so that now they have to do math again.
Yep. That's why I play so much Teemo.
Teemo forcing your opponent to play math.
I can't count to 7.
I will say that the Oracle Eye Legend of Runeterra does a lot of amazing things, but the Oracle Eye might be my favorite feature, period, in Legends of Runeterra. That's
good, man. That's good to hear, because we paid our engineers killed themselves to get that feature working to the degree that did.
Well, yeah, their sacrifice is not in vain, because it is fantastic.
I feel like it was like every quarter, somebody from engineering would be like, "Are you sure you want this?" And we'd be like, "Yeah, still want it, boss." And they're like, they would just, you know, kind of just shrug and you know, walk away. Yeah, it's a technically really complex feature.
Yeah. Oracle's Eye, when the game was like brand new, I'm like, this is my favorite streamer tool in the game, because I don't have to do math. I can just like look at it real quick. Yep, that seems good. Commit my attack and go back to talking to chat. Like, whereas the Magic, you have to like focus the entire time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you go and you play other games, and it's like, oh man, there's no eye here. You're really pushing the envelope.
I think
there.
Like, you know, we joke about doing math, but like, I think with most typical card games, like doing math is like unavoidable, right? But you can make it easy or you can make it hard. You know, versus the Marvel card game made it hard because it was like, you know, you're used to 20. What if we go to 50? And what if everything has trample damage? And you're just like, oh god. And so, you know, I think Oracle's Eye is really our attempt to say like, hey, we'd love to have players play at the strategy layer more and less at the like, let me count on my fingers, you know, before I can access that part of the gameplay.
Yep. I mean, I think you knocked it out of the park. To use more baseball references, well, this is a baseball podcast.
Oh, nice.
We're 2 for 2, batting 1,000 at the top of the 4th inning. Okay, sorry. So I actually, in the spirit of the Oracle's Eye, one thing I've been personally wondering, and I didn't put this on here, so I'm sorry, I'm hitting you with a zinger. And feel free not to answer it if you can't. But one thing I've wanted to see is like, I want to see not necessarily like we see cards that are public information in players' hands, right? Like if but I want to see like, oh, they have a celestial card in their hand that's generated. Like, even if it's just like a little bit of dust or something. Is that something that is purposely not in the game, where it's like, okay, we want you to have to, we kind of want that shrouded, or is it just a feature that hasn't come
There's
in?
definitely a delicate line there insofar as, you know, when we within design talk about the complexity of the game and what things create complexity in terms of like making the game manageable to play in the moment. Face-up cards in the opponent's hand is actually one of the big no-no areas that we try to be very careful about.
Okay.
In particular, face-up cards that can be played at burst or fast speed, because it just slows down turns immensely when your opponent feels basically compelled to do math like at every possible moment. You know? so we, it's something that we want to be very cautious of and protective of, kind of like
Sure.
for the general good of players,
Sure.
because we want to make sure the game's moving at a reasonable pace. Something like one you mentioned though, like I could see that being within the realm of like, hey, this is like a almost like an Easter egg reminder, as opposed to like you feel compelled to play around it all the time, right? And so with that, it's much more going to be around like the sort of like just like economy of, well, how many of effects are we going to have that create different things in the opponent's hand, and like which ones really merit that communication, and so yeah, right now I think we've fallen short of concluding, outside of the ones that are of course purely face up and purely face down, finding the ones that we're like, oh, this is worthy of that notification, particularly if you play on mobile. Like your opponent's hand is like miniature, right?
True.
So that's one of the things that we need to be conscientious of too, is like, hey, we're not excited to create basically like, gameplay advantages on different platforms.
True.
So those are some of the examples of what we have to keep in mind.
I'm just mad because today I couldn't remember if they had a Celestial card or not in their hand, another Celestial card. So I used my Atrocity on my Trundle to kill their Celestial in play, and it backfired.
Oh, in case they had like a Behold Celestial?
Yeah. And they still had
Dude,
one.
that's next level play right there.
Yeah, well, it was next level, meaning I went back to 0 because they did have another Celestial in hand, and I got completely blew myself out, but it was my own fault.
Now, the misplay, because I just now learned Atrocity can target things other than the Nexus. That's, I don't know.
True.
I don't know about
that was my downfall.
Always hit face. Always hit face.
I probably misplayed before that anyway, so putting myself in that position.
Chance.
But so we've got a decent number of listener questions, but Saucy, I know there's a couple on here that from our original list that we want to ask.
The listener question ones, or
are there any other ones that we wrote down that we want to answer before we go into listener questions?
Oh yeah, I think one big thing is, you're coming from Riot Games making this, right? And you're always have that League of Legends competitive scene. People are going to compare it to. It's like, it's Riot Games, so it's going to be a huge esports games. And I think something we get asked all the time, and something I'd be curious about, is how do you see the esports scene like compared, coming into the game itself, like something like as big of League of Legends, something more like Hearthstone, something smaller. Like, how important do you see competitive play being in this game?
Yeah. That's such an interesting perspective, insofar as like as a writer, I think you quickly learn that your perspective of like what the company is to you as a developer is so different than how players view it. Insofar as like, if you were to ask me like, hey, what does Riot Games try to make? I'd be like, we try to make the best games for the players that play those games. And so I think if the demand for any of our games was, we want a huge esports scene, and we think we could kick that off and have it be, self-sustaining to a degree, then like that's the direction we would go, right? When I think about that question with respect to Legends of Runeterra, I think one of the things that we've been delighted at is actually a lot of the community tournaments and competitions that that have sprung up here and there. And when we think about esports, one of the risks that we think about is actually less so sustainability, and more so like, hey, do we want, if we do that, there's a risk of it basically just destroying a lot of the grassroots community, tournaments and things like that. Maybe that's great if we could just hire all the people that run those things. But in practice, I think one of the big questions for us is actually, what might a competitive ecosystem look like that is more grassroots and inclusive of a lot of the insane effort and high quality experiences that we think like our community is like throwing out there, right? Like in many ways, I don't play a lot of fighting games myself, but it feels a lot more almost like a fighting game community thing, where it's like, the game ecosystem is made by us, the players, as opposed to just like purely hosted by Riot Games. But that's just my opinion. We actually have a central esports org that is aimed at basically supporting all of the games, all of Riot's games, new games when it comes to esports. So we haven't finalized or committed to anything in particular, but like that's an example of like one of the questions about like, when we say we want to be player focused and we want to make something for the players of this game, we are starting from a starting point of not assuming we should just make it look like how one of our other games looks like, just because that happens to be a Riot game. While there is a huge overlap between Legends of Runeterra players and TFT players and League players, we think there isn't what people get from the different games and what they expect is actually different, right? Like they're not the same game.
Yeah.
So we want to be really sensitive to and understanding, like, why do people love this game? What do they like about the community? How do we make that better? Not how do we just like show up and like try to replace everything with like our best ideas, right?
Yeah. So we have some very important questions that we have. This is the rest of the show we can throw out. I need to know.
I haven't even been recording.
What is your favorite Guardian?
Before this patch, Bluetooth.
Okay.
Is so I'm a shark share guy, like
okay.
for ride till I die or whatever. This patch, but my second favorite is Powder Monkey. And so the KDA Powder Monkey, that's I got a big choice, because I'm only gonna rock that if I get the KDA board, and I haven't actually bought the KDA board yet. I've only bought the Battle Pass, so it's a big inflection point in my life.
Yeah, that's true.
I just unlocked the KDA Powder Monkey today.
Oh, you're way ahead of me.
I've been playing a degenerate amount.
Right on.
A lot. I've been playing.
This is my week where I'm going to turn the corner.
Okay. I'd say that's an acceptable one, though. So
definitely.
It's doing the show.
Yeah. I'm just glad.
I assume based on that answer, that's not your guys' favorite Guardians. So what are your favorite Guardians?
Well, yeah. What is yours right now, Blevins?
So I'm the true whale, where I'll rock whatever the newest one is when it comes out, because I'm, again, degenerate and I buy all the stuff.
That's a not uncommon player behavior. I can say, having looked at the data. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's either Cosmo, which is OP, or Nightshade Gromp. Nightshade Gromp is my homie. I love Nightshade Gromp.
That's monstrous. I can say you are not in the majority.
Hey, the Nightshade Gromp homies rise up, but I also
it's an exclusive club.
It is. Yeah. There's actually been a small number of tournament players that have been rocking the Nightshade Gromp, and I always bring it up when I see them. But another thing that I've recently been seeing, and we've only now started getting there with the number of boards and Guardians, is like cool combinations of boards and Guardians. We're like, I don't like the and I'm sorry, because I believe that this card is named after you. The Von Yip cat. I hate that cat. I'm sorry. I hate the cat.
I hate him too, man.
It's the most annoying noise. I don't like cats in general. It's the most annoying noise. But the Von Yip cat plus the Halloween board. Now that gets a thumbs up, because that is a creative. I think that was Kavira that
Halloween board's sick.
Halloween board is sick, though. I'm a little done with the music for it. I'm on KDA now. I need KDA music in my life. Yeah.
I'm a big. I could get rid of all the other Guardians. I have my end game Guardian. I'm set. It's Infernal Drake.
Oh, okay.
Really?
So, yeah.
Okay.
Because
you're a dragon. You're a dragon.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm an Umbra main in TFT, and I think I tweet it.
Wait, weren't you guys talking about like Chonk or whatever?
Yes. Oh my God. Give us Chonk. Give it.
So if
you put Chonk in for $100, I will buy it. I'm just saying. I'm just putting it out there.
I want a plushie. I want an Infernal Drake or Umbra plushie. They're like the same character. And I think I tweet at Mort Dog like once a week asking for a plushie for.
Does he reply to you?
No.
I can poke him and
you
see.
Should.
That dude's never not on Twitter, so you know he's not. That's the disappointing thing.
Yeah, I mean,
I know he's a fan of Umbra as well. So
yes, I love Mort. Mort, like yourself, was very responsive, and it took forever to go through the red tape to get him on the show, but he did eventually come on. In an act of defiance, much like you. Not on this show, obviously, because this isn't a TFT show, but I do have a TFT show as well. Yeah, Mort is good people. Love Mort. Yes, put Chonk in as a Guardian in LOR, and
I don't know, man. The crossover precedent is.
It's true, people.
We hate crossovers with my lore.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
Chunk
get to
is
be
good to go.
toxic. I can be toxic on my own show.
It's true.
I don't. I don't have. Maybe Riot will yell at me. Okay. We are. Oh boy, we are quickly running out of time here. So we did cover a lot of the questions that were sort of like passively answered a lot of these questions in the listener questions, but we'll go through this one, and we can kind of rapid fire these ones if we want.
Right.
So Old Man Sands asked, are you satisfied with this new 2-month mini expansion approach for new card release as it's been executed so far? And if not, have you thought of any ways to iterate on it?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple ways I can answer that question. I would say compared to like a baseline of bigger releases slower, like every 4 months or 6 months. I at least as a player, I definitely prefer this one, and I think in general we've seen really positive response to our 2-month format. I think like we chatted about with KDA, one of the challenges when we do this sort of like set split is when the drops are that size, it's harder to get something for everyone into each of the sets, right? Like when you drop 110 cards, like it's a huge hype moment, and kind of everyone can like latch on to like a favorite champion or archetype that they're really excited to see. Whereas when it's just like 3 champs, usually it's an archetype that uses 2 of the champs, and then sort of like an outlier champ that maybe completes an archetype that was kind of split before, like Shyvana's a good example, right? And that's a little bit more challenging because I think that release becomes for 2 audiences or 1.5 audiences, right? And so I think when we look forward to content releases and next year and the year after, it's less about, hey, should we continue to release content that quickly? I think if anything, the answer is we should find ways to make content releases even more frequently. The challenge is how do we make sure those content releases are impactful and exciting for as broad of the players as possible,
That's a great answer. I'm still not sure how I feel about them. I think it's I've definitely seen the mixed bag, and I'm personally, I mean, I always like new stuff, and I actually like the smaller amount. I'm not like it. You don't need to put a lot of cards in to make a big impact on the meta. I mean, KDA has already like shaken up. It's already revived Spooky Karma in a lot of ways, and I think there's a lot of other decks that people haven't even explored. Just like from 5 cards. Feel the Rush Teemo. Absolutely.
The deck.
And once people unlock the oh god, I don't even know the name of the card. The P&Z one. I mean, who knows what could happen. Cosine Joe put out literal Scout Teemo. Scout Emusive's Teemo. He posted a picture of, which is awesome. Sweet. So
I like this question from Nix Kev.
Yes.
They ask, are there plans for more alternatives to what shards can be spent on?
Y'all got a lot of shards.
I have a lot.
I'll leave it at that. And I would, so there's kind of 2 points of view, right? With shards. Like one, we set out to, I think, break some of the stereotypes of card games when we made Legends of Runeterra, and a big one was the access that players felt to cards. And I think we did that across a bunch of dimensions. One was just like the agency that you could use to select cards, right? That's why we have wild cards, where we have shards, why you don't need like dust to you don't need to grind up your actual collection to to be able to buy the singles you want. But a lot of it was just rate, right? Like we just rain cards on players.
True.
That's not anything we're interested in changing, but we do think like some amount of card chase is actually great. And for players that play religiously, like there is no card chase. It's like the set comes out and you're like, I got the whole thing, right? And so I think there's a lot of ways in which we could address that. One would just be coming out with more cards, right? So you'd feel more compelled, to spend some of your shards. But other alternatives could include like, okay, what else can we do with shards, right? So there's definitely an active conversation that we're having. Not candidly, they're like not mega high on the priority list, right?
Yeah.
Think more about we should do / nice to have. But it's definitely something that we keep an eye on.
Sure. Do you know what the highest number of shards is that someone has?
I could look it up. It's something like we started talking about it in terms of how many years of content they could buy it already. So like we're pretty far out,
Okay.
from like that,
Because I'm like
spending $1 in our game for whatever.
Well,
on card.
I like to think maybe I'm not high up there, but I also kind of cheated because Saucy and I did the creator event, so we got a bunch of wild cards. So I've just been accumulating shards for a while, but I mean, I think I'm almost at 230K, which is
I'm around there.
It's pretty. Like, the top dog has 5 million shards.
I'm gonna check. I'm gonna have to check now. I'll text you guys. I'll be like, you're the bottom 20%.
Yeah, literally everyone has more shards than you, and we're giving everyone your number of shards, so you're literally last place.
Oh no! Dang it! It's like for enough shards, I think you should be able to buy a coffee date with Umbrage. I think is on the plans. I don't know if I read that in a patch notes.
The socially distanced COVID times coffee date. I mean, that's a pricey one.
I don't know. Saucy, you don't know how many shards it costs to get Umbrage on this podcast. I'm still going to be paying those off.
Oh, so you're out. I mean,
I'm out. I'm back out.
Yeah,
I spent them all. I spent them all.
And you had to give up your actual cards themselves, so you're out of the game.
Yeah, I literally had to grind them.
We could do some like in-game shard auction.
Ooh,
some kind of private auction. One of my buddies in college used to play this mud, like a text-based mud game. I don't know if you guys know what the hell I'm talking about. Aging myself right out of our player base once again.
But
like every 2 months they would basically run, basically like a whales only, auction, because with all these like basically handcrafted, the game developers would basically make like half a dozen items that were like handcrafted, and they'd go for just absurd amounts of their in-game currency. So
I mean,
I would love that as a player. I'm not saying we're doing that. We're probably not, because that doesn't sound very player focused. But
yeah, at all.
I was gonna say, if you're doing physical cards only in-game shard auction, I'm gonna end the podcast right now so I can keep grinding. That would be really cool. I like that answer. I like that answer a lot. Okay, so we've got a few more here. I'm going to combine these two. So one is from LOR Santupe, and shout outs to Santupe because they literally know the stuff that I'm doing in LOR better than I do. They tweet every single tournament that happens, it is happening or has happened. So shout outs to them. But they asked, is there a plan to add Master in other regions or to break down maybe some of the regions that
when they say Master, are they referring to like the EU Masters tournament?
I think they're referring to the rank of Master. So my guess, just based on who this is there going to be like a South America region for Master versus just the greater NA, and breaking that down more is my guess of the question.
That's definitely a conversation we're having, but I would say in many ways, like we're, so with the seasonal tournaments coming up, right, we announced that there's going to be basically 4,000-player, 1,024-player tournaments, one for each of basically the major shards. I think our internal conversations are actually much more like, how do we get that right number one, like the world, how do we get a world champion, as opposed to kind of how do we create more different shards. But I would say, like, if I'm guessing, like, if I'm interpreting their question correctly, if their question is like, hey, are you going to find a way to get more small scale, kind of like always available tournaments and competition into the game? That's definitely something we're looking into next year. It just may not come in the same exact form as seasonal tournaments.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay. Cephalopod in chat is mentioning this, and he's a tournament player. So I gotta, and he's also Nightshade Gromp Gang, by the way. But he said he wanted to give his feedback that, single elimination was not the format that people wanted for the.
That's fair. For our first seasonal tournament, of course, again, a lot of it is like, we're gonna try some stuff out and see what resonates with players. Of course, we have best 2 of 3. We have a lot of different formats already out, right? That that players are trying to qualify with Gauntlets right now. Some of the challenge there is just like, in working with publishing, like we were trying to figure out like what's the duration of event that our players that 1,000 players are even excited about engaging in. Right now the answer is like 5 rounds, 5 hours or whatever. That's a lot. Maybe we discover it's not a lot, right? Because players are like, I played this game relentlessly for 2 months to qualify. Like I'll play for 3 days straight if you give me the caffeine pills or whatever, right? Like we'll find out. We'll find out together, but like I have opinions about people playing a game so much until they die. I've probably made some comments that can't bear repeating with publishing around like no marketing is bad marketing, which they staunchly disagree with. But we're gonna iterate that. We're gonna iterate that shit, right? And like growing up playing physical card games, like I'm used to like the 11 round day ones, like I'm used to people basically passing out because they couldn't get a slice of pizza in their mouth. So if players give us a signal that they want that, it's like cool, we can probably talk about that, right?
Sure.
But for the first one, a lot of it was like, we already think we're really upticking the gravity and the the commitment that players have to make to really enjoy this tournament. So we're going to see how it goes, and if we need to go even more hardcore, like we're going to have that conversation.
Makes sense. Okay, Saucy.
Just don't lose.
just don't lose, Forehead.
Yeah.
We here at Riot Games would like to say that we do not necessarily endorse what is said on this podcast. Okay, had to get that disclaimer in there. There you go.
Strong points.
Yeah. Umbrage is on vacation, therefore his words do not matter. Okay. Okay, Saucy, I think we've got time. I've got one last one that I want to ask. But Saucy, is there maybe one more listener question that you wanted to hit here? I'm sorry, everyone who submitted questions that we couldn't get to.
We actually answered most.
We did answer at least
these.
passively a lot of these. So,
yeah. But what we didn't find out, what is your, I'm gonna say top 3 and bottom 3 favorite and least favorite cards, for whatever reason.
That's so many cards that I have to remember off the top of my head.
number one and number last, and why is it Yasuo?
So Yasuo probably is closer to my bottom 3 than my top 3.
Perfect. That's all I needed. We can move on.
So yeah, like, and so the reason why, and when I say that, it's mostly I'm answering from a designer point of view, where there are basically a bunch of champs that I think are really resonant and popular, like should be popular, right? Like Yasuo is like, he's like more popular than the next like 20 most popular League of Legends champions or something. So like every meta should be the Yasuo meta in terms of the popularity of the concept,
sure.
right?
Yeah.
But thank God he's not, because I think the design of that card, were it really top tier, is really frustrating to play against. And in particular, if you're new to the game, like I think a lot of newer to the game players are going to come out of a game against Yasuo and be like, I couldn't do anything ever, basically. Where it's like when that deck sings, you're just like, I didn't get to play Legends of Runeterra, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we can address. I think that's something that like more interactive tools like Bastion actually can help address, Notify, as well. So when we get more tools, I think that enables us to explore the viability and strength at the power level of some of these more spicy, like basically like not non-interactive, but like hyper like jerk decks, basically is what what we call them internally.
Blue decks, if you will.
Yeah. And so to contrast that, one of my favorite cards, and I've always said this, is actually Zed, insofar as I think if you look at those characters in League of Legends, both of them kind of like have degrees of like pretty toxic histories, or histories where like people just hated playing against them, despite them being high skill ceiling champions. But I think Zed in our game actually found a way to really hit that champion resonance without being just like this like jerk deck, right? Like he's not like, on paper, you'd expect him to be an assassin, right? You'd expect him to be like more like Yosari, where he's just got Challenger, Quick Strike, and Overwhelm too, because fuck you, and he, so he finds a different way to feel like the champion. And like to me, that's the constant challenge with like Legends of Runeterra champion designs and card designs, is finding something that resonates with a League of Legends champion base, where like half of the champions kits are all about like blowing you up, basically. And that's why the job's never boring. So in terms of, I guess that's like one in each. In terms of other ones, let's see. I really like Elise. I think Elise is another example of a champion that really gets there, and feels like she's always like a live pick in metas.
Sure.
Let's see. I'm trying to find like one I don't love. I know there's like a dozen, because my designers would be able to answer this for me, because like every other morning I'm like pinging them. I'm like, who designed this?
Who was
Off
responsible
the top,
for this?
on the top of my head, I can't actually remember many of them. Probably much to their delight. I really like Twisted Fate actually.
Yeah.
He's another one of my top champs. So I think it really hits resonance, and it really hits like a play style that I think if you play Twisted Fate in League, really hits that mark where he's got like a degree of like flexibility and like high agency. That's really satisfying. We got him throwing cards, which I think if we whiffed on that one, we probably all should have gotten fired. So but glad that we got there.
Yeah. Good for your job, at least.
Yeah. I'll think about. I'll try to think about some of the other ones that I like less.
Yeah, no,
we got Yasuo in. That's all.
Yeah,
I
we got
the
Yasuo dig. That's all. That's all Saucy was looking for.
That's all I needed, and now that I'm just gonna every night before I go to bed just reaffirm myself and my feelings from that clip. Like, oh, perfect. I'm not insane.
Well, how about, because this is a hotly talked about one. Where does Lee Sin fall on your radar in terms of well designed? Do you like his play style? What are you thinking about Lee Sin?
From like a design point of view, I really enjoy Lee Sin. I think his level 1 side and his level up clause, are kind of intent to really kind of hit that like frenetic, like multi-ability, like a kind of a ability spam, play pattern that he has in League, where he's almost like acting too quick for you to see and too quickly before you can respond. But I think similar to champions like Yasuo, like I think particularly if you're a new player, it can feel, and you don't understand like some of the interactions with his level 2 kick, it can feel often like there was nothing I could do, right? And so I think that one of the challenges with the level 1, level 2 design paradigm with Legends of Runeterra is my preference in terms of design taste is that a player basically spends some amount of time in the level 1 side and some amount of time in the level 2 side, right? Because that kind of gets that like transformation, like power of fantasy. And some of the challenge with the champs that are reliably easy to level up is that they just show up and he's level 2, and it's like maybe we can say like, he was in the jungle the whole time, right? But like that's one of those challenges where I think once we went down that path of like we have deck level up quests, then from like a reliability perspective, those champions kind of immediately became like the ones that are more reliable and dependable, and therefore the ones that you could really build your strategy around. And Lee is one of the most dangerous ones when it comes to that, right? Because like his level 2 can often be like the game is over now. So yeah, I from a design point of view, I would say I like him a lot. He maybe feels a little bit too complete, if that makes sense, insofar as I think he obviously points to like this like Voltron combo strategy, but like along the way he can also just remove all your opponent's stuff if he's well protected. So maybe a little bit too complete in retrospect, but if I was to pick a champion to be highly resonant and highly played, Lee Sin would actually probably be pretty high up there versus maybe like a Fizz or someone else. So
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I love Lee Sin, but again, I'm also degenerate and I love combo and all that. But okay, so I've got one quick one, and then we'll end on a more higher level one. This one's from Cosine Joe, and he asked, who is the target market for used cask salesmen? I mean, who is buying used casks?
Does he mean target player, or does he mean like in the lore of Legends?
In the lore, I think he means in the lore. It's gotta be.
So, Alex Lee, who is like the lead designer of Rising Tides, would be better to answer this, because I think we spent an unreasonable amount of time trying to get powder kegs and used casks to be like the same deck. We were like, I don't know, for whatever reason, we were like, yo, we should make it a mobile objects deck, and like that players will love that. That's not correct, and I'm glad we didn't go there. But yeah, I mean, Bilgewater merchants and Gangplank people play, champions and characters that like they're okay with something a little used, something a little bit rough and tumble. It's going to be on the high seas, so no big deal if it's banged up, right?
Sure.
And if it blows up and sinks your boat, like whatever, we got another boat. We'll steal another boat.
We got more boats. Love it.
Yeah, we always have more boats.
Love it. Oh, you've always got more boats. Gangplank 2021. That is now lore, by the way. Everyone can complain. At Riot Umbrage on Twitter. Just kidding. Don't do that. Okay, last question here, and take this one however you want. We'll sort of end on this one. What do you see, or where do you see Legends of Runeterra in 5 years?
Oh man, yeah.
The heady shit.
It's funny you mentioned that. One of the reasons I'm on vacation this week is because the team basically just spent a really intense planning period to plan out all our next year. So next year, parts of 2022, like kind of already in the books. But like we said at the start of this show, in many ways, I think this is a great question to end it. Is like we're on like step 1.5 of like a 10-step plan. Like there are so many things that I think we can bring. There's so many places we can bring this game that are not even necessarily novel, but I think would be novel to digital card games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like for many of us who grew up playing physical card games, like we're used to card games being a social experience. Like despite card games being a one-on-one game, when you're playing on paper, like you gotta make a friend or at least somebody that tolerates you to have an opponent, right? So I think when I think about the game in 5 years, like one of the areas that I'm really excited to bring the game is making the game like a social game, right? Mm-hmm. Where right now it's really like a game, like the community, and I think why we all love like the tournaments and these shows is because like that's where we get our sense of community from right now. But I would love to bring that into the game. On the side contrasting that, like we're fundamentally still a turn-based game, and one of the strengths of a turn-based game is that you can play it at your own pace if it's a single-player experience. And so we want to be really accommodating to that, and that's like, and having more compelling single-player experiences is actually one of the ways in which we could make the game welcoming to new players. And then one of the things that I think like the sort of like, I guess, step 5 of 5, if you want to call it, for me, like the reason why I think Legends of Runeterra is only beginning is because there's always been two halves to what makes a great card game. One is having this huge foundation of like thousands and thousands of cards, and then the other is actually having a bunch of really awesome formats that are a ton of fun to play. And when you have both of those, that's when you have basically like, card games are not like a game. Card games are like a platform, right? Where like we were talking about, Cube and Commander before this. Like to me, that's like some of the magic of Magic. Is it's the game you want it to be, and it could be any number of games, right? So to me, the idea of Legends of Runeterra as a platform, and potentially a platform that digitally scales and lets players find like new formats for us, and for the community, like to me, that's like super fucking exciting. Those are the sort of conversations that we have when we kick back at the end of a long week and talk about like, where's this game going to be in 5 to 10 years.
Well, I mean, I don't know about you, Saucy, but that is some really great, just a great piece to think on and sink our teeth into as we round this out.
Yeah.
Well, Umbrage, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. I know it's been a long time coming, but I think it was worth the wait. I had a great time. Really appreciate it.
I'll see y'all next election day.
Yeah. No, I don't want it to be that long. Maybe. Well,
that's why he said next 5 years.
Yeah, we can check in. We can check in on my 5-year predictions.
Yeah. Well,
we can chat.
I think we can lock that in.
You're 80% through your 5-year term. Yeah. How would you say that your term has played out?
We need more team. Okay, I'm not doing those.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you guys having me on the show. We're gonna have to make it happen again before the end of next year. Yeah, for sure.
We'll have to have a check-in for sure. Is there anything that you want to shout out or anything you want to plug before we go?
No, I don't want to. I mean, I don't need to plug anything. Y'all play the shit out of my game, and I love you for it. And everyone listening to this probably does too. Otherwise, like, how did you find us?
Great question.
No plugs necessary. I would say, on the KDA stuff, and as we come out with more seasonal tournaments and the last of Targon before we announce our next region, like, just keep the feedback coming. We love it. constructive is definitely better than, I'm going to quit the game, because if you're going to quit the game, like, that's cool too. But we'll stop listening to you. So yeah, no plugs there. Just really appreciate what you all have done for the community, and of course, love the community as well. There was one question I did want to answer.
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I think it was, and Saucy, you can check me on this. It was the 1,000. I think it was 1,000 Teemos. That is.
Oh yes.
1,000 Nautilus, or that are Teemo size.
It was from Wampa asked, would you rather fight one Nautilus-sized Teemo or 100 Teemo-sized Nautiluses?
Ooh, great question.
So like it Nautili, right? Is it be Nautili?
I think it is Nautili. I
it's
feel like so
elusive.
if we're thinking about it in the context of lore, deep scaling to 1,000 Nautili is pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
But also I'm like, I think I could just hide from a Nautilus-sized Teemo. And like is a Nautilus-sized Teemo elusive anymore? Probably not. And so that's just a big brick that's like not gonna actually win the game. So I'll fight the 1,000 Teemo-sized Nautilus. I'll probably lose still. Like, but it'll yeah.
Hey, Withering Whale can kill. Oh no, Withering Whale can't, because they're gonna be they'll be.
If it's pretty deep.
Well, if it's pretty deep, but they'll be tough. So Withering Whale wouldn't do it, but maybe Avalanche. Avalanche can take care of them all.
I'm switching back. No, I'm taking the single. I'm taking the single guy.
You can vengeance it.
I'm talking myself in circles.
Yeah, because then you can just you just have this big fluffy dude, right? And you just have the one, and you just throw all of your game designers at him to chump block. So.
That's actually the hidden story behind Von Yip. My game designers are the one cost units.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I love it.
I can say that because they made that card, not because I made the card. So.
Absolutely love it. Well, thank you. Well, thanks again, Umbrage. Really appreciate it. Saucy, where can people find you when you're not here on the podcast?
You can find me. My website's just saucymailman.com. I'm always on YouTube and Twitch, just at Saucy Mailman, doing the streaming thing. That's about it.
Awesome. Well, you can find me on Twitter at @the_Blevins. You can find both of us at discord.me/Runeterrable Radio. We're Runeterrable everywhere, at Runeterrable, Runeterrable.com, DeckPics.Live. We still want to see. Send us your deck picks, please. We would love to see it. We'd love it if you sent us a deck pick. Thank you. But that's going to be it. Thank you, everyone, for listening live and for watching. But for Umbrage, for Saucy, I am Blevins, and we'll be back next week to talk about some more Legends of Runeterra.